lot of excitement outside the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday. The High Court ruling Texas lawmakers went too far by imposing unnecessary regulations that had forced most of the state's abortion clinics to close. Marshall has more now on the ruling and what it could mean for laws in other states, including Colorado.
Joining us now to talk about last week's Supreme Court ruling is Josh Wilson, a political science professor from the University of Denver. Now, Josh, we had previously previewed this, and we had thought with the death of Justice Scalia, this would likely be one of those cases that would be a 4-4 split, thus keeping the laws intact for the time being. How did we get to 5-3 and this is struck down?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting kind of complete change over the course of the lifespan of this case. In that when it first came to the court and Justice Scalia was still alive, everybody thought that it was going to be a 5-4 ruling in favor of the state of Texas. Scalia's death makes people think that it's going to be a 4-4. Then, as you just said, we end up with a 5-3 decision striking down the Texas laws. And everything before and now still rode on Justice Kennedy, and Justice Kennedy didn't speak in terms of the actual opinions that the court issued. So we don't know exactly what his thinking was, but he did end up siding with the liberal justices. In some ways, that is not surprising. In other ways, it definitely is. In the ways that it's maybe less surprising are two things. One is this case dealt with a 1992 case called Planned Parenthood versus Casey, where he sided with what we would then see as kind of a liberal group. And then the other reason is there are some electoral reasons that he might have also wanted to side with the liberals now, but we simply don't know.
So this decision determined that what the Texas legislature passed into law and was signed into law by the governor was too restrictive for women seeking abortions. I know in Colorado we don't have similar laws as what existed in Texas, but are other states now scrambling to change their law because they're going to be in violation of what the Supreme Court ruled on?
Oh, so there'll be a period after this case where there's probably going to be a series of laws that are going to be litigated. We already saw yesterday with action taken towards Wisconsin and one other state had very similar laws. So you'll see probably the repeal or the striking down of similar laws in states across the country.
Give me the 2 bullet points, because I know you can sum them up greatly, as to what this Texas law tried to do that is now no longer allowed.
Sure. The Texas law, the 2 provisions that were struck down, one of them required doctors to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. So doctors that were giving abortions or working at clinics to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. That was struck down. The other provision was that Texas said that any center that was doing any form of abortion had to meet what are called ambulatory surgical center requirements. And that was also considered to be an undue burden and was struck down.
So I've heard this term, the undue burden. Let's use that term and relate it to what Colorado Republicans tried this past session. One of the bills that didn't get anywhere was going to put abortion clinics under the purview of the Attorney General and have certain regulations that must be met that seemed more for a hospital than for a clinic. Mm-hmm. Is that the type of undue burden that the Supreme Court is talking about?
Well, so the court gave the undue burden standard for the first time, really, since it was brought out in Casey in 1992. For the first time, gave it a little bit more definition. It's still somewhat open as to what that will mean in future cases. But if you go back to what Colorado has attempted to do recently, or what certain legislative members have attempted to do in Colorado recently, the anti-abortion movement is really going to be forced to rethink how it wants to regulate abortion. Because the 2 provisions that just were struck down were leading kind of forms of restricting access to abortion. And so with those off the table, there's going to be a period of experimentation. And so you might find things like trying to figure out how to shift who regulates clinics in order to try to restrict abortion or to increase regulations.
On Colorado's books right now, is there any law that is impacted directly by this decision?
Nothing that comes to mind, no. Yeah, the states that have really been passing laws that are related to what we saw in Texas tend to be, with the exception of Wisconsin, tend to be very conservative states, what you refer to as red states. Colorado, being an increasingly purple state, doesn't have this form of regulation on the books.
Is there ever a point where we can say that the Supreme Court has ruled, in this case on abortion, enough with attempting to legislate around how to limit abortions?
Yep. Abortion, this is a major case. This is really a major event in abortion politics, but it's certainly not going to end it. Kind of what we know from this type of conflict is that this is a major setback, a major roadblock for those seeking to limit access to abortion. But as we've seen in the past, the movement will be creative. It will think of new ways of trying to regulate, but there's going to be this transition period now and this experimentation period.
So this is done in Texas, but these other states that might have similar, they can continue, they can go to court now to fight them until it gets perhaps to the Supreme Court and see if they even hear it again?
Yeah, in all likelihood, these kinds of laws in other states will be struck down at the lower courts and it won't reach the Supreme Court because of this ruling. So lower courts can look at the ruling from Monday, apply it to their local states, and in all likelihood strike down these laws.
It'll be interesting to see what consultants decide as it comes to Colorado's law, the next, shot at the dartboard to figure out how to try to legislate abortions. Josh, thanks for joining us on Politics Unplugged.
We'll be right back.